In this last preliminary account of how I came to write one of the longest autobiographies in history, possibly the longest so far in the English language, in 8 volumes, which you can see on my website, alanmcfarlane.com, under Life. I want to talk about a few of the things that have made such a kind of autobiography possible, just I think in the last 10 years. If I tried to do this 20, 30 years ago, I don't think I could have done it, and I'll explain why. I had collected huge amounts of material over my life, thinking that I might write something like this, and so I had 70 or so boxes of papers and photographs and letters and so on. But what to do with this? So when I came to retirement at 67, I started to think about how to do this, and I accidentally, I suppose, found that the internet and modern computing, which was going through a revolutionary period in the last 15-20 years, made all sorts of new things possible. Like many technologies, the doors opened, and you can go through them if you want to. So, for example, while writing this, I came across all sorts of people who, when I was 15, 20, whatever, I was close to, and I could just look them up, find where they were in most cases, get in touch with them, and then have a correspondence about our mutual memories. And that, so in a way they were rejoining my life in this late phase, and they threw light on various things and made it all seem real, because I remembered them and they remembered me, and we remembered shared incidents. So the internet in that way was a great stimulant. A second feature was that there's now such a huge amount of background information. If you need anything on some event, there's a petrol shortage in 1963, shall we say, or something, you can find what caused it and have a footnote and so on. But much more importantly, there's a huge amount on the internet of social history documents and very good indexes to archives. So during the course of this project, particularly in relation to my family archives, Sarah, my wife, and I have found all sorts of new sets of manuscripts in the National Library of Scotland and elsewhere, which complement what we have in our own private archives. So your own archive becomes part of a much wider set of archives, and this would have been impossible 20 years ago. Another way it helped was that, in particular in relation to the very difficult period between 8 and 18, when I was writing about my school days and life at home, I re-met a friend who had been at both my schools during that period, and we started to write an account of the boarding school, the Dragon School, together. Jamie Bruce Lockhart was his name, and he was a year ahead of me, and his younger brother Sandy was one of my best friends. And so we started to collaborate, and this kind of intellectual collaboration, where you basically write absolutely together day by day. So each day you write something and then you send it off, and then you get comments, and then vice versa. Hundreds and hundreds of emails and attachments. That clearly would have been impossible in the past. You might have done it by ordinary correspondence, but it would be much slower and much less intense. So that deep collaboration with people at a distance, sometimes in other continents or whatever, would have been impossible without very modern developments. Another different kind of technological revolution is in health. I started to write this account when I was 67, and in the past, until the medical revolution of the mid-20th century and more recently, at 67 you would expect to retire and then put up your feet and do the crosswords and play a bit of golf or whatever, and then die. You couldn't really look forward to another 20-30 years of really active intellectual life very easily. But what has happened is that now we live not in just the two ages of education and work, but in a third age, as Peter Laslett described it, of retirement, active retirement from the 60s to the 80s, and then the fourth age, perhaps, if we think of David Attenborough at 93, still going on the Glastonbury stage, you can really hope to plan, if you're lucky with your health, to doing things intellectual for a long time. So I could now set out at least thinking that I might have enough time to do this very large piece of work. Now, one may wonder why I didn't start it earlier, and there are two main reasons. One is that it takes a huge amount of time. It's taken about half of my working life and thoughts for the last 10 years, so that's 5 years of work alongside other things. And to have allocated anything like this to such a project when I was a teaching academic and anthropologist at Cambridge would have been really impossible. It's not the sort of thing that university departments appreciate. I couldn't have entered any of this stuff for research assessment exercises or anything like that. So it would have been thought of as rather frivolous, and in any case I wouldn't have had the time to devote to it. So I couldn't do it then for various reasons. And another reason is that the whole specialness of it is that it's at a distance. When you're actually living events, and soon for about 10-20 years afterwards, they seem very prosaic and obvious and all around you. There is no distancing from them, and what was needed was a time to elapse to create a kind of magical realism in my own life. That is to say, ordinary things, humdrum things, become magical through distance. This is obviously behind many accounts of the past, from Wordsworth to Proust and onwards. And so the fact that I was writing about events some 40-50 years earlier made me feel I was going into, as L.P. Hartley called it, the past as a foreign country. My own life was a foreign country, and I wondered and was amazed at it, and wanted to find out more about it. So the fact that I could be healthy in that period was enormous change. Another background feature is that doing something like this, spending half your working life on such a, some would say, self-regarding, narcissistic project, requires a great deal of support from your friends and family. If they say, "Why are you wasting your time on this, Alan?" well, it soon scotches your ideas. But my wife, Sarah, was enormously supportive. She understood what I was trying to do. She read all my drafts. She reshaped the structures of them. She found more material and footnoted things, and in every way she helped. And in some ways these volumes are a co-set of works with her, and I owe a huge amount to her emotional and other support. Summing it up in a way, what happens is that in your late 60s, as I've discovered, your energy declines. You can't do as much work of any kind, physical or mental, as you could in your 40s. But having good health, and particularly having all these new computer facilities, means that you have, as it were, a set of invisible helpers. The computer doubles your productivity, at least if you're able to use it properly. You can type in things, correct them, in many ways work twice as efficiently with half the energy, and therefore it more than compensates. You both now have the time in retirement and also the support through computing to be able to do something new. Another technological revolution which many people haven't yet quite grasped hold of is in terms of communicating what you've done. Now, if you can't make what you're doing available to anyone except yourself, it rather takes away from the endeavour. Of course, it's therapeutic and interesting in itself, but you want to share it with at least a few people. And so one of the normal patterns of an academic or other life is that you retire and then you start writing your autobiography. And many of my friends and family have done that. But then what do you do with it? You write it, and then how can you give it away or make it available to others if they would like to see it? So you could print off a few copies, but if you want it to reach a wider audience, or you want a number of copies, the only way in the past, until the last 5, 6, 7 years, was to go to a private small publisher and order 1,000 copies, because it was cheaper to do it that way, and they would turn up in cardboard boxes, and you give away a dozen of them to your friends and family, and then the rest would linger in your garage. And it cost quite a lot of money to do it in any case. What happened only about 6, 7 years ago was that new self-publishing platforms came about, not merely to print and publish and distribute books, but to make them available all over the world. And the one I chanced on, after having published one of my, the first book, the Dragon book, with Jamie, with a small local publisher, when he went out of business, I was put on to Create Space, which is now Kindle Direct Publishing on Amazon, and it was amazing. I don't want to sound like an investment, but basically you prepare your copy and make a clean PDF copy of your work and send it up to them, and then they do the rest. And there's no upfront charge. You can change it overnight if you want to. You can get proof copies. You can do it in colour or black and white. You can do pretty long books up to 600, 700 pages, and it's very cheap. The actual publishing cost is low, and then you set your price margin above that, and it's instantaneous gratification. Within a few days you've got your book, and you can send it to people or give it to them as presents, or it's on every Amazon site in the world. That is absolutely extraordinary, and I think that is one of the great incentives to what I've done, knowing that I can make it there and keep it there forever. And so with all these different changes, technological as well as my good fortune, it's been possible to write this very, very long account. Even Marcel Proust had to self-publish his work at the end. So now there's no shame in doing this, and with the interaction between going through your own papers and corresponding with friends and revisiting the places that you once new and refreshing your memories of them. It's a kind of hobby or relaxation. It's a defragmentation of your life. It's a sorting and ordering and making available, if only for your grandchildren or for future social historians, something about a life. So it's an excellent form of activity. Of course, it's largely influenced again by several things about myself, one of which is that I'm an anthropologist, and therefore I've learnt the skill of participant observation. So I have been a participant in my life, and now I am coming back and writing up the field notes as an observer at the time, and observing myself in the field, because that is the activity of an anthropologist. And also I have made my own life strange, which is what anthropology does about your own society, by going to China or Nepal or whatever. So I've made myself strange through anthropology and learnt the skills of anthropology. And also I'm a social historian. I've edited many historical documents. I've written biographies of a 17th century clergyman and so on. And so I'm very well aware of the importance of social history documents. And while applying that to others, it's been fun to do it to myself as well.